الذين آمنوا منكم والذين أوتوا العلم درجات والله بما تعملون خبير.
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كلام الله عز وجل وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدع وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. وبعد, we welcome the dear brothers and sisters again on the 20th of Shawwal in the year 1444 Al-Hijrah, corresponding to the 10th of May, the year 2023, to another lesson from our lessons, continuing with the Sharh, the explanation, Al-Qawā'id-ul-Arba'a. The Qawā'id-ul-Arba'a by the great Imam, Shaykh al-Islam, the Mujaddid, Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, rahimahullah. And this explanation by our Shaykh Salih ibn Fawzan, Ala Fawzan, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, and may Allah give him good health and strength, because he is from the last of our great scholars that are still alive today. Not meaning that there will not be any other scholars, but from the senior scholars that are alive today. Allah yaghfir lahu, and give him good health and strength. So we're continuing with the section where it's still a part of the introduction, where Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah writes, "I'lam arshadaka Allah li ta'atihi," that know that may Allah guide you to His obedience. Anna al-Hanafiyyata millat Ibrahīm, that the correct path, or the correct way, the correct way is the millah, the nation of Ibrahīm alayhi salam, and that is to worship Allah mukhlisan lahu din, making the religion sincerely, purely for Him. Kama qala ta'ala, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ, and I did not create jinn or mankind except to worship me. So we're still looking at this paragraph from the book. So we covered before some parts of this paragraph, and here now the Shaykh goes on to explain about Ibrahīm alayhi salam, and he says, well, Ibrahīm, he is Abul Anbiya, he is the father of the prophets, الَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِ, those who came after him, the father of the prophets who came after Ibrahīm alayhi salam. He said, فَكُلُّهُم مِّن ذُرِّيَّتِهِ, that all the prophets are from the offspring of Ibrahīm alayhi salam. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَجَعَلْنَا فِي ذُرِّيَّتِهِ النُّبُوَّةَ وَالْكِتَابَ, that we placed or made from his offspring prophethood, we placed prophethood and books, here used as Al-Kitab, and the tafsir is explained as meaning the different books that were revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he made amongst his offspring prophethood and the different books that were revealed from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That shows us, like the books of tafsir mention, the great status and the great reward that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to Ibrahīm alayhi salam, this great prophet. this great prophet that Allah gave him, this great status, this great reward, that his offspring will be prophets, and they will have books revealed to them from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Lord of the heavens and the earth. So this shows us the great status of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Then the Shaykh says, فَكُلُّهُم مِّن بَنِي إِسْرَائِيل, they're all from, the prophets are all from Bani Israel, okay, the children of Israel. Hafid Ibrahim, they're the grandsons or the grandchildren of Ibrahim alayhi salam, except for Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, because he from the offspring of Ismail alayhi salam. But they are all his sons, even with the final prophet, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, is from his offspring. So all the prophets, فَكُلُّ الْأَنْبِيَاء مِنْ أَبْنَاءِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ تَكْرِيمًا لَهُ, yeah, as an honor for him, that all the prophets were from the children of Ibrahim alayhi salam, as an honor for him, as an honor for him. So this shows us the great status, the great position that Ibrahim alayhi salam holds to the believers. Now we have to understand that when we know and we respect and we honor all the prophets, and that the Ibrahim alayhi salam was the father of the prophets, it doesn't mean that we have this mentality, and we probably mentioned this before, this mentality or this idea that Ibrahim alayhi salam is now that all the religions that have a connection to Ibrahim alayhi salam are still valid till today. Yeah, they still hold validity today. No, we don't accept this. Rather, the last prophet who was Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, came and abrogated, cancelled out, nullified all the religions before, all the other books that came before the Quran, and his Sharia is the Sharia which is established. So we don't have this idea like some of the weak-minded Muslims that, oh, we're all one faith because we all ascribe to Ibrahim alayhi salam. Yeah? He is the father of all the prophets, all the religions came from him, so we have this brotherhood of religion or brotherhood of humanity. No, we don't believe in this. We don't accept this, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly established that the religion of Islam is the correct religion, and Allah will only accept the religion of Islam. Only accept the religion of Islam. So for us, for the Muslims, yes, because all the prophets were based, the religion, the deen, the way of life that they brought to the people was Tawheed, singling out Allah alone for worship. And that's what Islam is, and we'll see that later on. So then the Shaykh continues, he says, وَجَعَلَهُ اللَّهِ إِمَامًا لِلنَّاسِ يعني قدوة. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَالَ إِنِّي جَائِلُكَ لِلنَّاسَ إِمَامًا, and I am going to make you, I have placed you as a leader, a prophet, or a leader, someone to be followed, someone to be followed. And this shows us the great status and position that Ibrahim alayhi salam held, because all the prophets, his offspring, followed him in that what he established, which was the Tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yani, we can see from the life of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the reliance that he had upon Allah. These are some of the benefits that we get from the lives of the other prophets. When it comes down to how do we benefit from other prophets, is by looking at their lives and seeing how they had the Tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the aspects of reliance upon Allah, trust upon Allah, returning back to Allah, knowing that Allah owns everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the dominion. Yeah, everything goes back to Allah. Lillahi fis samawati wa ma fil ard. For Allah belongs everything which is in the heavens and the earth. So these type of aspects make it easier for ourselves in our daily lives and having trust in Allah. So we carry out our duties and our worldly matters as well with trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That we know that if we're sincere, that if we worship Allah correctly, that if we stick to what Allah says, that we will have a good life in this dunya. Good life in this dunya. So these are some of the aspects that we benefit from the lives of the Prophet. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, about inni ja'iluka linnasi imaman. I'm going to make you as a leader prophet, meaning a qudwa, a example to be followed. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the Shaykh mentions, brings another evidence, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, inna Ibrahīm kana ummatun. Yeah, kana ummatun, yani that Ibrahīm alayhi salam was a ummah, a whole nation by himself, meaning he was an imam, yuqtada bihi, that he was an imam as an example. He was a leader as an example. How that he trusted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the people were against him. They were ready to throw him into the fire and all these type of things. But he trusted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Trusted in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah tested him with great tests. Great, difficult tests. Tests that he had to carry out. And those are examples for us as well. And the Shaykh says, وَبِذَلِكَ أَمَرَ اللَّهُ جَمِيعَ الْخَلْقِ. And this is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had ordered the whole of the creation with, which is, and كما قال تعالى, which is, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That I did not create man and jinn and mankind except to worship me. And the Shaykh goes on to explain this ayah later on. We'll see later on how the Shaykh explains this ayah in detail, that only put the purpose of our creation. The purpose of our creation. And he's mentioned this ayah before, and he's going to mention it again. And because it's a very important and a foundational principle, it's a major principle in our religion. And I recommend everybody to memorize this, if we can, to memorize this ayah, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Because when we memorize it and understand it, what it means, has such a great effect. Great effect that what is my purpose on this life? And what are my dealings with other people? They have to be based upon sincerity. Our dealings with each other, our dealings with our mother and father, our dealings with our brothers and sisters, dealings between husband and wife, has to be based upon sincerity. Have to be based upon sincerity. So you submit to the religion. Otherwise, when it comes down to the crunch, or when it comes down to hard, difficult times when you have to make decisions, like for example who you marry, culture comes into it, or family issues come into it, or love of wealth comes in, or love of beauty comes in, and the religion is pushed aside. The deen is pushed aside. What Allah has ordered is pushed aside. We're not saying that you can't have family values. We're not saying that you can't have a concern for wealth. We're not saying you can't have a concern for beauty or anything like this, or compatibility. No, we're not saying this. We're saying that the foundation of our relationships should be on sincerity for Allah's sake. So advising each other, helping each other, dealing with each other, that we remember that we're doing it for Allah's sake, so it's blessed. So it's blessed. So وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Then Shaykh Salih Fawzan goes on to say, so Ibrahīm دعا الناس إلى عبادة الله عز وجل كغيره من النبيين. That Ibrahīm alayhi salam called the people to the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal, just like the other prophets. Just like the other prophets. Or, then the Shaykh says, all the prophets called to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وَتَرْكَ إِبَادَةً مَا سَوَاهُ, and leaving off worship for anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. كما قال تعالى, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. That we, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا, we sent, فِي كُلِّ. Now here, the word kulli means all. Every ummah, every nation, every people was sent a prophet, was sent a messenger. There was someone that came to proclaim the message to them. And what was the message? A'na'budullah wajtanibu taghut, that worship Allah and keep away from false deities, keep away from false gods. So, when people come along and say, well, you know, how do we know that in such and such place that, you know, they were told about Islam, that they were told about, the message came to them, a messenger came to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا. We said for every nation, every people, and this shubha comes, this doubt comes to some people. They'll come and they'll say, well, I don't really know, I don't think so, maybe what will happen to them? And even that situation, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give them a great test on the Day of Judgment. Why? Because Allah is the most just. Allah is the most just. We have a difficulty in establishing justice. We have difficulty in establishing justice because we're either ignorant, we're too we're ignorant of the religion, and we have such a tight, exaggerated understanding of culture. So we put the culture above the religion, and these type of things. So, but these doubts come to us that but what about these people, and then we have from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that there will be people that will come, they will be born between the time of two prophets. You know, they didn't reach that prophet, Allah will test them on the Day of Judgment. So don't think that Allah is unjust. Rather, Allah is most just. It's we that we have difficulty in establishing justice. So, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا, indeed we sent for every nation رَسُولًا. And the same message was sent to all the religions. أَنْ يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. Yani worship Allah and keep away from the false gods, keep away from the false deities. So worship Allah, come back to that. And that's what the message was. Simple. The shaitan was there to lead the people astray from going away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Shaykh goes on to another paragraph, another section, where he talks about, yes, that's the foundation of the religion. The foundation was the worship of Allah. But as regards the shara'i', the rules and regulations, they could be different. And the Prophets called to Tawheed, but different rules and regulations. So the Shaykh said, Shaykh Salih Fawzan, he says, وَأَمَّا الشَّرَائِعُ الَّتِي هِيَ الْأَوَامِرُ وَالنَّوَاهِي وَالْحَلَالُ وَالْحَرَامُ. So as regards the Sharia, the different types of Sharia, then there are commands from Allah, prohibitions, matters of halal and haram, prohibitions and allowances, something which is permissible. So the Shaykh says, فَهَذِهِ تَخْتَلِفْ بِاخْتِلَافِ الْأُمَمِ حَسْبَ الْحَاجَاتِ. And these are different depending on the nations that they were sent to, depending on their needs and their situations. يشرع الله شريعة ثم ينسخها بشريعة أخرى. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala legislates a sharia, a rules and regulations. He sets down a legislation. Okay, sent down a regulation, sent down rulings. Okay, then he abrogates them with another set of rulings. إلى أن جاءت شريعة الإسلام فنسخت جميع الشرائع. Then the deen of Islam abrogated all of the other shariahs. Okay? وبقيت هي إلى أن تقوم الساعة. And it will remain until the day of the final hour. Until the final hour, until the final time, the religion of Islam will remain. So it's cancelled out all the other religions. It's cancelled out all the other Sharia. And you'll find that the Sharia of Islam is so blessed and it's such an ease for us that our Sharia, alhamdulillah, is easy for us. So for example, in the Sharia before, rules that were sent down to the Jews, for example. The Jews, the Yahud before, they were, in their Sharia, it was such that if one of them dropped a drop of urine on their clothing, it was in their Sharia that if they dropped a bit of urine on their clothing, that they would have to cut that piece of cloth off. So the urine fell on their clothing, they would have to cut it. They weren't allowed to wash it. They had to cut it off, that piece of cloth. So it shows us how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was very strict with these people. Very strict with these people. Because they needed it. They needed a tight hand. They needed tight rules and regulations. But for the Muslim Ummah, the Sharia of Islam, the Sharia that we have now, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what the Prophet conveyed, is that if you drop urine on your clothing, is that you wash it. You wash it. It is not permissible for a Muslim to walk around with urine on their clothing. If you know with certainty that you dropped you went to the bathroom and a splash of urine came onto your clothing, you wash it. But we're not paranoid. Maybe I don't know. And this is wiswas. This is whisperings from shaitan. So you get some people, they say, I'm not going to pray at work during the day. You know, I'm talking about somebody's working at, during the day, and it's dhuhr time prayer, and he says, I can't use the bathroom at work because it's a bit dirty, and I don't know, I might catch urine on my clothing or something like that. No, this is whispering from shaitan. You are not allowed, and people go to their bathroom, they use the bathroom during the day. It's not permissible for them to walk around with urine on their clothes. They have to wash it. They either wash it or sprinkle water on it, where if they feel that they think there's some water on their, some urine has splashed onto their clothing, or they know that it's splashed but they don't know exactly where. From the sunnah it is to splash that area with water to keep away that doubt of urine being on your clothing. And this is the ease of our religion. This is the ease of the deen of Islam. Likewise, amongst the Yahud, and it shows you the mentality that the Yahud had, that they would always try to get away from the religion. Okay, so Allah made it difficult for them. Made it such that they had to be kept in line. So for example, amongst the Yahud, that if a woman came on her monthly cycle, her menses, she would be she would be sent out of the house. They couldn't live in the same house. They would have to wait until she became clean, so they could remain in the same house. When she came on that menses, that's it. They had to separate. The husband and wife had to separate. But in the deen of Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, out of His mercy for us, has allowed for us to still have contact with our wives. contact with our wives even when they're on their menses. Even when they're on their menses. That, the only thing that is not allowed is to intercourse, but other than that, everything is allowed. Everything is allowed. That they live with them, they eat food with them, everything. Whereas with the Jews, the women had to eat separately in a separate quarter of the house, and they couldn't have normal husband and wife relationships. Dealings with each other, talking to each other. No, they would be separated far away. So that was in their Sharia, but that was abrogated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and abrogated by the ease of that the husband and wife can live together and spend time together, to the point that they can do everything except for intercourse. Everything except for intercourse. So it shows us the ease of our religion. And these are some examples of how the different Sharias, previous ones, were abrogated. And then Shaykh Salih Fawzan goes on, he says, وَأَمَّا الْأَصْلُ الدِّينَ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَهُوَ تَوْحِيد. That the origin of the deen, the religion of the prophets, is tawheed, singling out Allah alone for worship. فَهُوَ لَمْ يُنْسَخْ وَلَنْ يُنْسَخْ. Okay, it is, and it hasn't been abrogated, the aspect of tawheed, and it will never be abrogated. دينهم واحد وهو دين الإسلام. And their religion is one, and it's the religion of Islam. بمعنى, with the meaning, الإخلاص لله بالتوحيد. Sincere, pure sincerity for Allah with tawheed. That you only rely upon Allah. That you only make dua to Allah. That your heart is sincerely, has this love and hope and fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is that pure ikhlas lillahi bit-tawheed. Then he says, أما الشرائع, then as for the legislations, فقد تختلف. Perhaps they're different. تنسخ, and they're abrogated. Like in التوحيد, however, توحيد والعقيدة من آدم إلى آخر الأنبياء, from the time of Adam alayhi salam till the last of the prophets, كلهم يدعون إلى التوحيد وإلى إبادة الله. All the prophets called to tawheed and to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now remember, the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just ruku, sajda, prayer. These are aspects, these are factors, these are aspects of worship. But there are many, many other things as well, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has legislated for us. And we have just finished from the month of Ramadan, and now in the month of Shawwal, where fasting has been encouraged in the month of Shawwal, that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned about whoever fasts 6 days from Shawwal, then it's as if he's fasted the whole of the year. He fasted Ramadan, followed up with 6 days from Shawwal, and it's like the fast of the whole of Ramadan. So there are many different types of aspects of worship. The dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remembering Allah, saying astaghfirullah, saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, reading Quran. And this is something we try to encourage, that even after Ramadan, try to keep it up, that you push yourself to reading Quran. Imagine, in Ramadan, we're trying to finish the Quran once, twice, whatever, as much as we can. Try to read as much as we can in Ramadan. Soon as Ramadan stops, that's it, we put the Musaf down. No, we're trying to encourage our brothers and sisters to push themselves, exert themselves to try to read as much Quran. And especially if you have a timetable, a regular timetable, then that helps a lot, or you have some aims of memorizing certain surahs. Then the Shaykh goes on, وَإِبَادَةُ اللَّهِ, and the worship of Allah is ta'atihi, is being obedient to Him. فِي كُلِّ وَقْتٍ, in every time, بِمَا أَمَرَ بِهِ, with that which He has ordered, مِنْ الشَّرَائِعِ, what He has ordered from the legislation. Okay, what He has ordered from the legislation. So whatever is from the religion, we try to do it and follow it. فَإِذَا نُسِخَتْ صَارَ الْعَمَلْ بِالنَّاسِخ هُوَ الْإِبَادَةِ. So if it is abrogated, then the action, what abrogated that becomes worship. وَالْعَمَلْ بِالْمَنْسُوخ لَيْسَ عِبَادَةُ اللَّهِ. And acting upon that with which was abrogated is not worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Talking about the previous religions that have been abrogated by Islam. Jazakumullahu khairan for listening. We'll finish with that today, and then hopefully continue. There's a question here. How do we advise someone who persistently commits sins? Do we keep advising, or is there a limit if they don't listen? This all comes down to who is advising and how is that advice. Okay, who is that person advising, and what is that advice? How is that advice? Because you have to remember that people are of different grades. People are of different grades. So we have to advise them based upon, it's mentioned in you'll find in books of Athar, narrations, they'll say deal with the people, I think it's a hadith as well, deal with the people on the qadr of their levels. Qadr aqulihim, according to the level of their intelligence or their understanding. So first of all, like, it might be somebody in your family who's committing a sin, okay, and the other thing is a major sin, minor sin, these type of aspects. Is it kufr, is it disbelief, is it nifaq, is it, and many different things. But anyway, generally, we continue advising, and sometimes the advice, for example, it might be in your family, it might be that that person doesn't want to take your advice. That person finds it difficult in taking your advice, and and that really happens a lot with when you're trying to advise parents. You're trying to advise parents with something, and they find it difficult because what is this? My son is advising me, telling me this little boy who was doing this a few days ago, and now he's telling me I'm old. So some people are like that. They can't. They find it difficult to accept advice. So it all depends on who. So the best thing is to get somebody else to advise them as well. If you're dealing with parents or you're dealing with elders, then get somebody else to advise them. Tell them, explain to them, because you might not be effective in your advice. You might not be effective in your advice. So it all depends on the person advising. Also, the way you're advising people. A lot of times, really, we have to be diplomatic when we're dealing with advice. I know it sounds a bit compromising, but no, I'm not talking about compromising. I'm talking about being diplomatic in the way we advise people. For example, some people, they'll just come up to somebody and say, "Oh, what are you doing? Haram, Okay, there's ways of encouraging somebody. There's ways of encouraging somebody to leave a haram, to leave off a sin. There's ways of doing that. And that you learn from the manners of the scholars, of how to change an evil. Yes, we know there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says, if anybody sees an evil, then change it with his hand. And if he cannot do so with his tongue, if he cannot do so with his heart, and that's the weakest of iman, or the weakest of. Now this hadith, actually it's the other way round, that you start with making inkar, rejection of the evil in your heart first. Because you have to know that, is this a sin first? What type of sin is it? Okay, so you advise them, you tell them, okay, you start with it in your heart, you start with it in your heart, knowing that this is wrong. There might be circumstances you can't change that evil, and maybe that evil will lead to a greater evil, so you have to balance these matters up, and that all comes with knowledge. Comes back to knowledge again. The more knowledge we have of these type of things, the easier, the better, the more effective way it will be in changing somebody who's sinning. So, for example, I don't know, maybe, and this is just an example off the top of my head, that your parents have a television in the house, okay? And the television itself is not evil, but what is watched on that television is sometimes can be good and sometimes can be evil. Now, to get rid of that, to change that, you've started practicing, your iman has become strong, okay? But you don't really have the ability and the authority to go in there and do something to that television, because it's not your property. It's not your property. All you can do is advise. You can advise. They don't listen, that's their responsibility. They don't take it on board, that's their responsibility on the Day of Judgment. Ours is to tell them. And you can, I mean, different ways of telling them as well. Oh, let's do this instead. Oh, rather than watching the whatever television program, let's go out, let's read a book, or different ways. But don't bore the people, don't push the people away. So there's a lot of things that person needs to do. So basically the thing is, yes, we have to stop and advise the people as regards sins. And we use hikmah, wisdom, in dealing with that. And we look for avenues and ways of changing that. So we start with ourselves as examples, and then we encourage them by different methods, using somebody else, giving them a book, leaving them a audio tape or something, audio clips or something like that, inviting them to an Islamic meeting or something, and making dua for them. So there's many different ways like that. So we don't give up. We don't give up, but we advise them in different formats. And Allah knows best. Jazakumullahu khairan for listening. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.